Well, I think maybe I got this. um, Obviously, just got to take a second to get things going, just because I don't know what I'm doing half the time. That's okay. It's 6 in the morning where I am, so I call it my morning brain if I screw something up. So, hopefully that's coming in the audio and the screen. Just gotta do test. Hey, Bonbon Dur. Am I coming through? Is it making, is it working at all? This is new territory for me. Yeah, like I said, just giving it a second to figure out if this is actually working or not before I dive into what I wanted to practice today. Perfect. Awesome. Just got home from work to chase bandits. Oh boy. Well, we will see on what kind of stuff we make. But yeah, now that I know it's working, I'm just going to dive right in. So, without further ado, I guess, what I wanted to do is I have been watching some older Runehammer videos, specifically like on challenge tuning, just trying to touch up my game, or make sure I'm refreshing myself on some of those key mechanics, which are just so good. And the challenge tuning ones mentions that they have the three Ds: the damage, the disruption, and the duration. And it reminded me of a conversation I on the forums a while ago, where we talked about the disruption topic a little bit more, and we came up with a bunch of key disruptors. All the community members contributed on general categories of disruption, and then I made this worksheet and this worksheet to kind of compile that whole topic together. And then I thought, you know what? Rather than doing some crazy video, uh, and trying to audio record it, I just need to get down and practice and just make sure that my working knowledge of disruption and the other 3Ds and how to challenge tune is like on par. But before I jump into the actual practice, I kind of just want to talk about these worksheets, which are available on the forums, and I've linked in the description or whatever. So this one is our kind of the overview of the theory, and what we essentially boil it down to and is that disruption is the use of external circumstances to disrupt or interfere with the player's ability to reach their goal. So when it comes to disruption, it's things like the environment, what's happening, different circumstances overall that interfere or get in the way of players doing what they want. And so we kind of get down to about 15 different rough categories. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but essentially you have things like, line of sight. If you include some form of line of sight disruption, if you disrupt that for a player, it can up the challenge, or it can decrease the challenge if you reduce it. Yeah, I did design these myself, just about the topic, and then like the information came from the Runehammer community on the forums. Yeah, so including line of sight makes the situation harder. If you include some element of forced movement, it can make the challenge, the environment, or the encounter harder. obviously, you know, if the environment itself is dangerous, the terrain is just flat out potentially going to kill you, you can disrupt the players and make it more challenging. But then you have more obscure things like disrupting initiative, bumping turn order, rerolling initiative, having creatures that go in between turns. If you have some form of attribute disruption, like disrupting the normal roles and modifiers that players are using, getting a little bit more meta and scrambling their character attributes for an encounter. Nothing really permanent, but or maybe make successes failures and failures successes, or you know, roll under versus roll over, things like that. Or down here, you know, activatable disruptions, having some element of in the scene that you can activate or the enemy can activate, and that can disrupt the scene. And so that's the general overview. And that leads into what I wanted to practice today, which is this worksheet that kind of provides a little siloed opportunity to just design a simple encounter, but include a focus on disruption, and then see where your brain goes. So up here I have my encounter example. This is just kind of the working area with target, if hearts are needed, a space for key mechanics to write down, and then check boxes for the 15 types of disruption, and obviously a blank because I know we didn't think of everything. And what's nice about these general categories is they're general, and so how you apply them is an infinite number of ways. So they're just general categories that can be broken down into applications depending on what you're thinking of. And then key mechanics, and then, sorry, I already did key mechanics, but up here is the callback to the challenge tuning video that Hankerin did, where essentially you have different levels of disruption. So a scene that has a level 1 disruption is something that is really low key. It's very, you know, more of a nuisance than an actual impact on the fight. So if it's a level 1, it's a low disruption, or a level 6 is a high disruption, something that's a catastrophe in and of itself. And so Hankerin's advice, and why I wanted to practice this, is that if you have a working knowledge of what is a level 1 disruption and what is a level 6 disruption, and where your scene falls in that scale, then when players need to be challenged, so they're doing kind of, they're just blowing through everything, just taking easy street through your encounters, you can up the level of disruption, or the other 2Ds, which is damage and duration, and make the encounter harder. Or if it's a little too punishing already, you can drop the disruption level or make it a little easier, or if the players figure out some way, they can drop the level of disruption. And so in the game, in the session, this is a sliding scale that you can start at one point and then move around as needed for the players. So that's enough talking. What I want to do is just start practicing some encounter designs focusing on disruption. I have a dice here to kind of inspire where I'm at with the level of disruption, but for the very first one I have an example already. So I'm going to start out with a level 2 disruption. So for example, I'm just going to mark level 2 just to remind me that that's where we're at. And let's zoom this in just a little bit just to make it a little clearer. So we're at a level 2 disruption. So it's a little bit more than a nuisance, but it's not all the way up to really impacting the fight overall. And the idea that I had was essentially a creepy graveyard, and I wanted to focus on line of sight. So I'll fill that in a little easier. So my focus is line of sight here, and so I'll just draw a really quick encounter space. You know, maybe there's a gate here that they can come into. Then there's a mausoleum in the background. There's a empty pit, or, you know, empty grave that somebody's digging out already. And then you have a bunch of tombstones, various sizing, all lying out. sporadically. It's not one of those clean, nice cemeteries that is all orderly. It probably has a grave digger that's managed in. It's just kind of gone haphazardly through it all. And then what I'm going to do from here, thinking about line of sight, is I'm just going to include some basic fog just to indicate on my scene that there's fog about. I can even just point it across. And then I'm also going to include spawners, and I'll talk through kind of what I'm doing because I've had this idea already, just as a quick example of what I'm doing for this disruption scene. So I've got 4 basic spawners: fog, graveyard, done. We're going to leave the target at 12, and we don't have to worry about the hearts. So now let's talk about mechanics. So if my focus is on line of sight and the disruption is at a level 2, I want to come up with mechanics that highlight that. And so for the first one, we'll do our fog. The idea of the fog is that ranged attacks at far are just flat out impossible. Like you can't hit anything from that distance with the fog being so thick. And then anything ranged at near it equals hard. So anything far is impossible. Like it's just, you could roll, you could say I'm going to shoot into the fog, and if you roll a 20, you hit something, but you have no idea what you hit. If you're shooting ranged at near, you can maybe see a silhouette in the fog, but it's hard because maybe the fog is shifting a little bit, the shadow that they're casting is a little strange, and so making it hard. That right there is a disruption of line of sight, because now I'm interfering with the player's ability to see their targets, but it's not so bad that it really messes with their ability to do anything. It's just a little bit more than a nuisance. But to really highlight that it's more than just a 1, it's up to a 2, I also included these spawners. So we have the spawners here, and what they do is every round, they spawn 1d6 undead, probably skeletons or zombies or whatever. And then I roll a 1d4 to indicate if it's at this spawn point or this spawn point or this spawn point or this spawn point. So they're coming from different directions. Equals location of what that group spawns at. But here's the line of sight element to it. If players aren't near, so they must be at least near the spawn point. So maybe there's like open graves everywhere or another crypt or anything, to know where they're coming from. So if my players are up over here and I roll a 4, then they'll know that by then I'm sure they'll figure out that they've spawned, but they won't know that they spawned from this direction. But if they're near enough to this one or maybe this one, they'll know that they spawned in this direction or this direction, but because we have the fog, they can't stand here and shoot at it without it being hard. Hey Glock, glad to have you. Glock. There's an extra syllable there. I apologize. So yeah, so they can hear near, and so with the range, it's hard until the enemy, the undead, move in close, and then they have the basic encounter or whatever, where they're tussling with zombies who are all reaching out and grabbing at them. and then we can just go from there. So, boom. That's a simple scene that highlights a focus on disruption, and specifically line of sight. But now let's try it again with a different encounter and see what kind of that variation that we can come up with. So I'll do a 4. So we'll leave that there as a reminder. We're going to do a level 4 disruption, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe what I'll do is I'll have an activatable disruption, and what I'll do is, yeah, I'm going with the thumbnail idea as well, which was burning fire. So what I'm going to do is terrain danger. So this is going to be my burning building. So I'm going to leave the target at 12, and then what I'll do is I'll just draw a basic building. So building there. There. We'll throw in some columns, a couple of columns there, and then everything is on fire. And then what we'll do is we'll put our enemy up over here, and our players will have a set of stairs here, which are also on fire, and then they can be kind of like here, here, or here. It doesn't really matter where the players' positions are. Okay, next up is a disruption for your boss and his beer thief. Okay, we'll do that. So anyways, so this disruption, we have a simple scene. Maybe they're on like the 3rd floor of a building. The building is on fire. They're dealing with this. Everything is on fire, so we have our terrain danger. But we also have, like I have in the thumbnail, a knight, a vengeful knight who's wielding some big bad sword, swinging around and just going to town. So let's talk mechanics. So definitely the fire. So we'll have the fire increases target 50-50. Okay, so 50-50 every round per round. Fire could increase target 50-50. So I know that's not necessarily part of the disruption because I have a target disruption, but it's there to increase the danger. But also, we're going to say that, okay, I'm not going to bother with that. I can't think of it. I have a different idea. So what we'll do is come back to that. We'll go to the activation, and that will be these columns can be destroyed with a hard hit or 1 heart of effort. Okay. When they do, when destroyed, everyone in the scene rolls a dex or constitution or whatever. Destroyed, roll save, or take ultimate. I know that's pretty intense, but gotta bring the pain a little bit. You're in a burning building, so some rubble falls on top of you or whatever, and it's on fire, and it's gonna hurt. So every time it hits, it destroys. Every time it's destroyed, you roll against save or take ultimate. And so we have a terrain danger, which is the fire, but we also have that activatable column, and that everyone rolls a save that includes our knight guy. So just by destroying a column, you might be able to make a good solid hit on that enemy. Okay. But here's the challenge. The knight is attacking, when he attacks, it's everyone attacks everyone, and my handwriting is terrible, everyone near him, including columns. So the knight doesn't care. He's vengeful. He's out to get the players. He doesn't care that if he brings the building down. So he's going to be running around, and if he attacks, he may damage the columns, and so the columns are getting weaker and weaker. And then if 3 columns destroyed, building collapses, save versus death. So now the players have to try to, one, be wise about if they destroy the columns, or they have to pay attention to what he's doing, because maybe he's hitting the columns and bringing it down. And if he's running around the room, he's going to be damaging, this might be at like 7, or it'll make it hard and it'll just smash through it directly. And then they've got to worry about that. So, yeah. And so we have our terrain danger. We have activatable things. It's at a level 4, and so I'm hoping that you can see the difference between how this one up here, let me bring that down, this one is a level 2 with a line of sight, disrupts a player's experience and interferes with their ability to reach their goal. At a lower level, which is less disruptive, but it's also focused on line of sight, and what the experience is with this one, where we have different focuses of disruption, and it's a level 4. So between the two scenes, you have a level of experience, not a level of experience, but a different experience, because the focus is different and the level is different. That's the power of disruption, is it really adds, in my opinion, a dynamic element to the scene that, when you start sliding it and applying it in different ways, can really add a lot of variety and a lot of depth to your scenes, because you've included some form of disruption. So, but let's keep practicing. I'm doing this all before work, so I wanted to get my practice in before I head off to the office, and things like that. So, all right, so we have Bonbon Dur requested that we need a disruption for his boss and his beer thief. Okay, so 1. Let's see kind of, what if we roll the disruption dice for each type of disruption, for example? I could. That's a lot of types of disruption, but we can go through a couple. So let's start out with your scenario. So we have a thief. Okay. We have a thief, and we have a boss, plus boss. So I'm going to say this thief and his boss are working together in this scenario. And again, we'll just leave the target at 12. And so let's go with, because we have a thief, we're going to include, let's zoom that in a little bit more. We're going to include a loot gear element to it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do forced movement. Okay. So this is where my brain is going. Okay. And we're at a level 1 right now. Okay. So my brain is at, what if they were at a beer factory? What if they were there at a distillery or whatever, where to go with it? I don't know the situation that you're thinking of, Bonbon Dur, but this is where my brain is at. So we have a big long space. We've got tons of, pipes. We have a bunch of different pipes. We've got some big kind of barrels. It's more of an industrial scene here. So you've got, you got your catwalks as well, leading across the scene. And so you have different height elevations and whatever. Maybe a few other things, maybe a little cart or something, and we have got lots of boxes over here. Okay, whatever. So what we can do is, so let's focus on the thief element for the loot and the gear. Sorry, I keep shifting things around. There's a line right in the middle of my table that if I'm writing right over it, it just messes up. So I'm just kind of shifting things around. Okay, so thief element, the loot and gear. Okay, it's a level 1 disruption. Okay, so we're going to keep it pretty minimal, and it's going to be something that if we realize that it's really not impacting the team a little bit, that I can up the scale and we can kind of make this into that sliding scale to match the challenge needed for the scene. So our thief, if he rolls, so he's going to be attacking and going to be moving around, moves around, attacks, whatever. He's working for the boss, and he's going to be moving and hiding everywhere. If he rolls, an 18 plus, modified on his attack or on his action, then he will steal 1 piece of loot from whoever he's interacting with. So if he's attacking a player, and between his bonuses and everything, he rolls a 18 or higher modified, then he'll get to take a piece of gear. And then I'll probably use my method of, okay, of your carried, roll that d10 and then count down, and we'll take that one. And now the thief has that piece of gear, and so the players can run after him, or he can start using it against them. And so I left it as an 18 plus because it's a level 1 disruption. Now, if I'm feeling that the scene is just too easy and I want to slide that up a little bit and move it up to maybe a 3, maybe what I'll do is in the scene I'll add some element of description saying, he all of a sudden pulls out his hood and he vanishes into the shadows, and now spotting him is harder, and instead of a 18 plus, all he has to roll is 12 plus or 15 plus. It doesn't really matter. It depends on the scene. So now I up the challenge by increasing his ability to steal things, and now he starts focusing mostly on taking away the gear and all the fancy things. And so all players are standing there fighting the goons and the security guards and everything like that, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a little hand snatches out and your sword pops out of your hand, or your backup potions pop off your belt because the thief reached out and grabbed it while you weren't paying attention. And so I can up that challenge and have a focus on that loot gear disruption by having that thief there. But what about forced movement? Okay, so throughout the course of the fight, or maybe as the boss is trying to get away, he runs by one of these, vats and giant barrels, or even there's a wall of barrels and things like that they can do with. And he knocks one over and starts pouring out, classic strange brew scene, whatever. It just or Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You knock it out. Oh, sorry about that. My camera just spazzed. Probably decided that it was being silly. Anyway, so all of a sudden the liquid starts pouring out and starts filling the room, and it just kind of gets all wet and slippery. And so we have when movement. So move range. I mean move far. If you dash, you need to roll dex or move until you hit something. Okay, so as they're running, if all of a sudden they run through the liquid on the floor, if they're dashing, they have to roll their dex save to keep their feet. If they fail, they just keep sliding until they hit something else, whether that's the far wall. It just will depend on where everything's positioned. They'll just be moving in that straight line. Now again, if I wanted to up the level of disruption, then I can say, rather than just moving far, it could be, move near, or make the dex save. Or I can say move hard and say make a hard dex. I can up that level a little bit. If I, took it all the way to a 6, it would be like there's so much liquid and, coming out of these barrels that you're essentially in a tidal wave and you really can't stop yourself from getting blasted up against the wall and everything's splashing up and you have to save just to like swim around. And so that's a level of disruption that can slide depending on the scene. So there's a basic focus on force movement and loot gear disruption, and you can see how I can slide that back and forth to match what I'm hoping for. So again, let's try it again. We're just, like I said, this is just morning practice, getting my working knowledge of the concept of disruptions a chance to be the highlight of the scene, and really kind of practicing my mental space for how I can include these in my encounters. Because I know sometimes for me, disruption or damage or duration are always the highlight or my focus, and I sometimes forget them. So I want to make sure that disruption, the ability to disrupt the scene is always at the ready, that I can throw that into a scene if I need it, or I can include it in my prep to make these scenes more dynamic. So let's start again. And do we have, I'll leave it up to you guys, otherwise I'll just pick one, but is there a type of disruption that we should try next? No problem. That was a good prompt out of nowhere. Yeah, so activation, forced movement, initiative, party split, attribute, identity, line of sight, target, communication, increasing the DC, the difficulty, loot and gear, terrain, crowd control, inhibit movement, and nullification. And all of these are, like I said, this overview. I linked the original conversation in the description, as well as in that forum topic. I have the PDF available for this overview page and for this this worksheet to kind of just print out and practice. Cloak. So Cloak suggests what is nullification. So let's go with that one. I'll give an example. And Eduardo, these sheets are available on the forums. Yep. And okay, and then JD, hey JD, nullification and communication. So let's do that. So we're going to do nullification, which is the idea that you nullify some aspect of a player's ability. So think about anti-magic fields or anti-healing areas where for some reason an element of the game is completely nullified and you can't use it, or where you're fighting a monster and it just absorbs your spells. You've nullified spells. And so we'll have nullification, and then communication. This one's a little bit tricky because it plays right on the line between the RP at the table and in-game elements, and so you kind of have to work with it, because the idea is you're inhibiting or interfering with the player's ability to discuss tactics or communicate. Maybe enemies sense what you're doing and they were able to react better, or you actually aren't in a place where you can talk, or you're so far away. Think about a spaceship. If normally you'd be able to communicate via your radio, and if all of a sudden that gets jammed, if you're at one end of the ship and the other end of the ship, and your friend is getting attacked by mutant reptoids, if your communications aren't up, will you really know to run to their aid? That's a question that kind of comes out to both metagame knowledge, what's happening, how you play the scene, things like that. But then let's roll. Oh, we got it. Okay, we'll do a 3. So basic, mid-grade for both. So let's see. Nullification and communication. Vacuum chamber. Vacuum chamber. That's an idea. Okay, yeah, let's go with it. Let's go with a vacuum chamber. Okay. So we're going to have a general scene, and this is going. I feel like this is going to be a space scene. So we're going to keep this here, and we're going to have our big fat doors. That's a terrible little square scene, but whatever. Okay, so we'll have our things like that. It's pretty bare room, and what this is we have a vacuum chamber, but what this is actually going to be, this is going to be an airlock scene. Okay, so your players have been placed into an airlock, and whatever, and so maybe what they're going to do is, the first thing that's going to happen is that they're going to drain out the air. Okay, so it's a bit of an airlock, bit of a vacuum chamber, whatever. So we're going to drain the air. Okay, so drain air. And so what that's going to do is two things, and it's actually going to be part communication, part nullification. I'm going to nullify my player's ability to breathe. Okay, really harsh. And so maybe it's at a level 3, so I need to find some way to make it so it doesn't feel like a level 6. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, so they're going to drain their ability to breathe, which will be 1. They are taking 1 damage per round. 1 damage per round due to asphyxiation. I decided to do 1 damage per round because taking away the air like drops it all the way to a 6 in my opinion. But maybe rather than saying, okay, you're going to take D4 or D6, and you only have 2 rounds of breathing space, by saying only 1 damage, that pulls it back down to a 3, so it's still an extreme case, but they have a little bit more time, and so that's kind of how I feel like I can bring it back down to a 3 disruption. So they're holding their breath and they've got a little bit extra time because they're only taking 1 damage per round. But if it's getting too easy and I need to up the challenge, I can say, now it's a D4. Anyway, so drain air, take 1 damage per round, and so there's our nullification. And then communication, I'm thinking there's actually a scene in, I don't know if anybody's ever watched White Collar, where the antagonist and the two main characters are in a room that sucks out all of the air. And in that scene, because there's no air, they point out that you actually can't talk, right? There's no air to transfer the sound waves from your voice to your friend's ears. So without any air, you can't actually make the sound, so you can't hear anything. So now, without air, no air equals no talk. Players can't communicate with one another. So now this is the question where it can comes into play. Maybe I can say at the table, you know what? No talking. All you can do is hand signs, and whatever, body language and things like that. Or we can try to find some in-game element to make it out. But I think it depends on the players. I personally think that if I just said at the table, okay, in this scene, no one can talk, and we're going to apply that to ourselves at the table, say, we can't talk, none of you who are in this room can talk anymore until you figure out how to break the seal on this room, or open it up, hack the panels, pull out the wires, pull out your rebreather, And yeah, it essentially becomes charades, and it becomes an element that, if your table and their players are open to it, can become a great out of game or like at the table role playing experience, rather than trying to force some mechanical element into the game. But if there was something like that, you could just you can go the other way, and you can try to figure out some way to include a mechanical. Yeah, everyone physically can still talk, but we're going to roll dice to make sure that your point is across, or roll charisma, or do everything is hard because you can't communicate, things like that. So boom, we have a level 3 disruption with some simple mechanics, and we have a simple airlock scene that goes from there. Okay, let's do a few more. I came prepared with plenty of these. So let's get another suggestion. What's another one or two types of disruption that we should try? See, I'm just watching the comments over here to see if anything. So far we've done line of sight, we've done activation, we've done terrain, nullification, and communication. Now, while you guys are thinking about it, this doesn't, just because I wrote these on here doesn't mean I can't do them again. It's a question of like, okay, first up we got Eduardo calling for target, so we'll do a target one. It's wonderful because of these general categories. I've really loved that they're just really basic categories because it gives you a broad spectrum, but it's how they combine leads to new and exciting mechanics that add to the scene. And so that's why I've really kind of enjoyed thinking about disruption this last week. So we've got target. Do we have another one? Or we can really highlight target in just a single scene. And so while we're talking about target disruption is, so we have, I know with ICRPG there's targets, but there's also targets. So we have targets like this one here, which is the difficulty challenge. That's what's declaring how hard is it in here. Target over here is your ability, your player's ability to focus on their target, or their single enemy. So for example, like I want to hit the big bad guy, but something is preventing me from doing that. And then we have Mama would just say target again. So yeah, I guess we'll just go with increasing DC as well. Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll roll a die. And a target disruption, so their inability to focus on their enemy. So maybe things are being redirected from their target enemy to an ally, like spirit links or empathy. Maybe they're all sharing a pool of health, and so I can't do things like that. Or maybe all of their attacks get redirected to something else, like phylactery. So you hit the lich, and rather than damaging him, all the damage flows into the phylactery, and as long as it's never above 10, then it doesn't do anything. So let's go with that. So let's do a lich's tomb. Okay, so we'll make another scene, and we'll add levels to it. So these are just kind of like ledges for some depth. We'll add pool of water just because it's in a cave. We'll add kind of a big boulder there, and then we'll add some kind of wizard lock here that that they can see that the lich is doing some nefarious thingy. So we'll include our lich here, and then we'll include our players who are running around doing something. Okay, so let's talk through increasing difficulty first. So something that will increase the difficulty, and because it's a level 5, it's going to either just flat out, I'm going to say rather than a 12, I could just say, this is now a 15 or even like an 18. But let's leave it as a 15 right now. So we'll start out with the scene with a 15, and we'll roll. We'll say that for every round that this wizard lock is staying active, it's going to increase it by 1. So every round, increase target by 1 plus 1 for wizard lock activation. Okay, so while the spell is being cast, starting at 15, the wizard lock is making it tougher. And so maybe what we'll do is it's just draining. Okay, so it's draining the scene of energy. It's just pulling everything away. It's just really, and plus with the drain and chaos, because maybe a wizard lock is a portal to another world, and it's just pulling in all sorts of things. We can think of maybe the maelstrom tables from Olverd's Tower, so every round something is coming out of it or whatever. And so maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's something that we can do, where rather than increasing the difficulty, which it's doing because chaos is coming into the world, we can also say every round roll on chaos table to bring something into the scene. And we're talking, because this is a level 5, we're talking things like that really distract from the Lich. Okay, so the Lich is there. He's manifesting and pouring his energy into this spell, but the things that are coming out of the wizard lock are so bad that if you choose to ignore those to focus on the Lich, it's going to be a detriment. So a prime example of this would be maybe like Devil Dust. Devil Dust comes out, or a Hellion comes out, or a demon, or something kind of, swap locations, randomly, things like that. So it's, things are being chaotic. We can do things like, maybe go in reverse. Go reverse. Things, chaotic stuff. So every round, this wizard lock is making things tougher, and it's distracting you from the Lich, which you have to get to take his staff, his magic item, get it away from him, interrupt his spell in some way. But we're doing that every round that you're spending. It's just going to get tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher, because you're just in the midst of this maelstrom of chaos. And there's your level 5 disruptive scene, and it just really gets in the way of players doing what they want, which is, like I said, that's the overall kind of our consensus description of disruption, is it's using external circumstances to disrupt or interfere with a player's ability to reach their goal. So this stuff at level 5 is really messing with players' ability to reach their goal. Okay. I think I got time for maybe one more. And so let's just do one more and call it a day. And then I totally encourage you guys to snag this on the forums and look it over, look through that topic. Conversation was great, really enlightening. It's wonderful what kind of stuff is on the forums. But then grab this, and I would love to see what kind of disruptive encounters you can think of, whether you share that on the forums or on the Discord, either way. So let's do one more. Give me 2 more suggestions for types of disruptions. Otherwise, I'll just pick because I can stick my finger out and point something on the page and pick something. I'm not afraid of that. But if there's one that you really want to see in the last one, just let me know real quick, and then we'll dive right in. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's go with initiative and identity. All right, Yavin, we'll go with that. That sounds great. So initiative and identity. So initiative is, we often think about in-game, like in the scene, ways of manipulating the challenge, but I like the initiative disruption because it takes it out of there, and now you're actually toying with game mechanics just a tiny bit, just to add that variety. Like, so initiative is bumping turn orders, re-rolling initiative, something every round or whatever, monsters that can interact between turns, and then identity is effects that make characters kind of question their identity. It's the classic charm, it's the classic mind control, it's the doppelganger effect. Okay, so again, we'll just leave target at 12, and then so the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm also going to roll this twice, and I'm going to show you that you can have different levels. We've kind of already done it a little bit. We're going to have different levels for each one. So I'm going to have a level 5 initiative disruptor and a level 1 identity disruptor. Okay, just to give that variety. That these do not have to be on the same level. They can be different than one another. So level 5. So we got a level 5 ID and a level 1 initiative. Okay. So let's think through what kind of scene would have an initiative disruptor, and I'm thinking for that one it's something mild. So we're gonna go with maybe their turn order gets shuffled occasionally. And then the other one, the level 5. Oh no, the level 5 is the initiative one, so they're going to be tough to maintain a classic initiative order, and then there's going to be an identity, which is going to be a level 1. So it's a bit of a nuisance. So let's go with having a blank, but I need to. This is the practice. This is why I'm practicing, so I don't have to have a blank. So let's see. I'm thinking to myself, what if there was a turning room? What if there was a cultist that was casting mind control or charming? Or I'm thinking mechanical. Okay, so I'm liking the idea of a mechanical room. So I'm thinking like conveyor belts. So I'm thinking a scene that has Star Wars. I'm thinking Star Wars like Episode 2 vibes, where they're at Geonosis in the factory, in the droid factory, and so they have different conveyor belts all doing different things, and all the players are running around on those conveyor belts, avoiding, the cutting, the smashing, the crunching, the moving, whatever. But because it's a level 5, I'm going to say it's on the fritz. So on the fritz. Okay. So let's have 1, 2, 3, and we'll do a fourth conveyor belt. Okay. So we'll have conveyor belt 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can probably make this into a bit more of an exciting arrangement when I'm working on it. But essentially, what's going to happen is initiative. So okay, yeah, body swapping could do that one. So let's work with that one in just a second. So what we could do here is that on the fritz, so we roll a d4, and that conveyor belt moves. Okay. Well, I guess they're all still moving, but we're going to do conveyor belt d4 every turn. And we're going to do that. Anyone who's on that conveyor belt is the one who moves. So every turn, players on that conveyor belt move. Okay. My reasoning for that is because of all the extra craziness that's happening on. What's happening is we have to jump at the right moments. Okay, they're like, okay, the swinging axe just pulled up, so that's where you jump. Otherwise, everyone's kind of like waiting for their moment. So every turn, so I go my turn. Okay, we're gonna kind of go through the whole round. I guess it could maybe not every round, but just every round. We'll roll the d4 or whatever, and everybody who's on that conveyor belt has an opening and they can move and they can take their action. Everyone else is kind of stuck dodging and doing things like that. So it's really disruptive on who's going to move each round. Okay. And then we have our identity. So body swapping to make things more complicated. Okay. It's a level 1 nuisance. So maybe part of this factory is we have a brain. It's like part of what their workflow or kind of their production line is body swapping. Okay, so maybe we have frogs coming in here, and we have civilians coming in here, and as they move along in the environment, eventually they get to this spot or this spot. Oh. Sorry, I gotta figure out my camera. They get to this spot or this spot. If you end up here or here, you get body swapped with whatever is in that other place. Okay, so if a player ends up right here and there's a frog here, well, for the time being, the player's mind is going to be switched with the frog, and the frog's mind is going to be switched with the player. And so as long as you can avoid that, then it remains that nuisance. But if it happens, all you have to do is get the one frog, which I would allow players to like continue to communicate. It's Princess Frog style where they can talk but they're just a frog, and the player is just running, being a pretty docile frog or whatever happening. But all you have to do is get that frog and that person back to one of these at the same time. Zap, they get body swapped again. So it becomes a nuisance, easily avoidable, but it's still there, and maybe it becomes a bit more of a challenge later on. But it's that initiative one, having to dodge around all the crazy machinery that's happening as we roll. Okay, here, everyone on this conveyor belt has an option, everyone on this conveyor belt has an option, everyone on this conveyor belt has an option. Okay. Yeah, so yes, absolutely right, JD. Yeah, they can still act but sees through frog eyes. So yeah, so I would pretty much say, if you just got turned into a frog, you can act normally, but you have the stats and the abilities of a frog. I would still let you kind of do what you want. Maybe they can talk, maybe they don't, but I would definitely make it, because it's a level 1, definitely make it very obvious. You can tell that frog is your friend Steve, and that frog is your friend, you know, Bob. So different combinations, different levels, leads, in my opinion, just from hopefully from these examples, to more dynamic, more depth to your scenes. And then throw in the other D's of damage and duration, and you got a lot of really cool levers to play with. So we're going to call it for this morning. This was my just morning practice. I'm feeling pretty good about that. That's 6 encounters that were very different from one another, that really provide my brain with some thinking space. And so maybe in the future you might end up seeing some of these in future games. But okay, well, good morning everybody. Glad to have you here. Glad this all worked out for the best. And so technology, I won against technology today.